I was clutching my wine glass when one of my husband's friends leaned in and said, "Take off your shirt, just for us." The room, once buzzing with laughter, turned cold as three sets of eyes pinned me down. That's when I realized the night was never about friendship. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. By the time I hung up the phone, the sauce on the stove had started to burn. I quickly stirred it, but the smell of scorched tomatoes clung to the air, a sour reminder that the evening I had carefully planned was already slipping out of my hands. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, trying to shake the creeping irritation from my chest. "It's fine," I told myself. "It's just one night." The clock ticked by slower than usual. Every clink of a spoon, every creak of the wooden floorboards seemed louder, sharper, as if the house itself sensed the coming disruption. I kept glancing at the window, the street outside darkening under a fast-moving sky. When the doorbell finally rang, it echoed through the quiet like a cannon shot. I smoothed my hair, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. They tumbled in like a gust of wind, laughing, clapping each other's backs, their energy swallowing the calm that had blanketed the house. Ethan was at the front, flashing the same wide, easy smile I vaguely remembered. Behind him, Jake and Tyler carried duffel bags and the unmistakable scent of a bar, beer, cigarettes, and something bitter I couldn't place. "Claire, you're even prettier than Ryan said," Ethan said, tossing a wink my way. Jake gave a low whistle. Tyler just grinned, eyes roaming briefly around the hallway before settling on me, lingering a second too long. I forced a polite laugh and stepped back, letting them crowd into the foyer. Their shoes scuffed the polished floor. Tyler dropped his bag right by the door without so much as a glance around for where it should go. "I hope it's cool we grabbed a few drinks before showing up," Jake said, lifting a six-pack he had half finished somewhere along the way. He held it out like a peace offering, but there was something off about the tilt of his smile. Too loose, too sure of itself. "Of course," I lied. My voice sounded higher than usual. I caught myself twisting my wedding ring and shoved my hand into the pocket of my apron. The kitchen light above us buzzed faintly. I led them in, offering them plates of finger food I had meant for Ryan and me. Our quiet dinner now mutated into something else entirely. As they lounged on my furniture, cracking jokes and tossing crumbs on the floor, a heaviness settled over me. Not fear yet, but something close. A premonition, maybe. Still, I smiled and nodded at their stories, laughed when it felt necessary, tucked away the flickers of discomfort like loose threads I would deal with later. Just one night, I reminded myself. Just one night. At first, the noise and chaos felt almost like a protective shield. Their laughter ricocheted off the walls, rowdy and infectious. And for a few minutes, I could pretend we were just a group of old friends, sharing harmless stories over cheap beer and stolen memories. Ethan told a story about Ryan locking himself out of his dorm wearing nothing but a towel. Jake chimed in with a tale of a bar fight they narrowly avoided, or claimed they had, at least. Tyler's booming laugh filled every corner of the house, rattling the picture frames and making my carefully curated living room feel suddenly too small, too fragile. I laughed along, maybe too easily, grateful for the noise, for the distraction. But somewhere between my second and third glass of wine, glasses that Tyler kept topping off without asking, each pour a little heavier than the last, the atmosphere began to warp. Jake became the first crack in the illusion. Every time I went to the kitchen, he found a reason to follow, reaching unnecessarily close over my shoulder to grab a bowl, grazing my hand when there was no need. He would linger just a little too long when we passed each other, his cologne leaving a trail I didn't want to notice. When I met his gaze, accidentally, his eyes didn't flick away with embarrassment. They held mine, steady and hungry, a silent message I refused to decode. "Need any help in here?" he asked. his voice low and casual as he leaned against the counter, arms folded. "No thanks. I'm good," I replied, forcing a cheerful tone that didn't quite land. Back in the living room, Tyler sprawled across the couch like he owned it, one socked foot resting shamelessly on my coffee table. Ethan seemed quieter than the others, nursing his beer with an almost detached smile, watching everything unfold with an unreadable expression that made me even more uneasy. Around midnight, when the clock struck that strange hour between safety and vulnerability, Ethan clapped his hands once, sharp and decisive. All right," he said, leaning forward with a grin that was a little too wide. "We have a game we used to play back in the day." I laughed, a quick nervous thing, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "What kind of game?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Jake's smile curled, sly and feral. "Truth or dare," he said, his voice almost a purr. "But, you know, the adult version." The others chuckled knowingly, their eyes glinting with something that prickled the skin on the back of my neck. A chill slithered up my spine, cold and undeniable. I should have excused myself then. I should have found a reason, any reason, to leave the room, to end the night on my terms. But something in the way they all leaned in, something magnetic and menacing at once, held me frozen to the couch. How bad could it be? I thought, swallowing hard as I tucked my legs under me and forced a small, hesitant smile. The night was just beginning to show its true face, and deep down, I think I already knew it wasn't going to be fun for much longer. The first few dares were childish at best, desperate attempts to recapture some version of the boys they used to be. Tyler dared Ethan to drink a shot of hot sauce without flinching. Jake, laughing too loudly, stumbled through a clumsy dance routine that made the beer cans on the coffee table rattle. I laughed with them, tension easing from my shoulders for the first time that night, telling myself that maybe I'd been imagining the strange undercurrents in the room. Maybe they were just drunk and stupid and harmless. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then Ethan, the so-called calm one, turned to me with a glint in his eye that made my skin crawl before he even opened his mouth. "Okay, Claire," he said, voice deceptively light. "Your turn. Take off your shirt. Just for us." The air left my lungs in a sharp, involuntary gasp. I blinked, my laugh sputtering out before it fully formed. They had to be kidding. Right? Surely they were just pushing buttons, trying to get a rise out of me. So I laughed, a brittle, too high sound, and rolled my eyes, waiting for them to break, to admit it was just a joke. But they didn't. Tyler smirked, knocking back the last swallow of his beer, then crushing the empty can in his hand like a punctuation mark. "It's just a dare, come on," he said, his voice thick, almost teasing. But there was no warmth in it, only a leering challenge. Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes pinning me where I sat. "Ryan doesn't have to know," he said softly, the words curling into the room like smoke. "Just for fun. Just us." The walls seemed to close in an inch at a time. The laughter, the stories, the harmless dares. They had all been leading here. Not a game. Not really. A slow, deliberate grooming of the night's energy until this moment felt inevitable. I sat frozen, my mind scrambling for something to say, some way to rewind the evening back to when it had all seemed almost normal. But there was no way back. The couch pressed against the backs of my legs like a trap. The heat of their stares, Ethan's expectant, Tyler's mocking, Jake's ravenous, pinned me down harder than any physical force could have. I mumbled something, anything, about needing to check on something upstairs, my voice cracking like a snapped branch. I stood too fast, knocking a bottle over with a sharp clatter, and bolted from the room without looking back. The stairs blurred under my feet. I slammed the bedroom door and locked it with trembling fingers, bracing my weight against it as if expecting them to follow. Downstairs, laughter exploded, jagged, ugly. Whether they were mocking me or congratulating themselves, I couldn't tell. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that the sanctuary I called home no longer belonged to me. Something invisible and sickening had crept in and built a nest inside these walls, and I could feel it breathing against the door. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay stiff and silent in the darkness, the covers pulled up to my chin like they might shield me from the reality downstairs. The sound of muffled voices rose and fell in drunken waves, sometimes erupting into bursts of laughter that felt too loud, too cruel. Every thud of a footstep, every scrape of furniture against the floorboards, made my muscles lock tighter. Even as exhaustion dragged at my body, my mind stayed razor sharp, wide awake, replaying every glance, every word, every lingering look until they all twisted together into something monstrous. Sometime after 3 a.m., the house grew quieter, though the damage was already done. I stared at the ceiling, watching invisible shapes crawl across the darkness, my heartbeat thudding against the mattress. I wasn't sure when my eyes finally closed. Maybe they never really did. By the time the first pale fingers of dawn crept across the bedroom window, I was already up. I moved cautiously, my bare feet making no sound against the wooden stairs. The living room looked like a battlefield. Beer cans were scattered across the floor, some still leaking warm, sticky remnants into the carpet. Crumpled pizza boxes drooped off the edges of the coffee table, and someone, probably Tyler, had knocked over a lamp, leaving shards of ceramic glinting dangerously among the debris. The air stank of stale alcohol, sweat, and something sourer beneath it. The smell of carelessness, of a night that had rotted the moment it began. No note, no half-hearted apology scrawled on a napkin, no guilty text buzzing on my phone. Nothing. Just the mess, the echo of their laughter still poisoning the walls, the cold, heavy silence they left behind. When Ryan finally returned that afternoon, fresh from the airport, suitcase in hand, he barely had time to set it down before the words spilled out of me. I told him everything, every detail, every glance, every dare, every ugly, smirking word. At first he brushed it aside, a frown flickering across his face.